Okay, so I'm going to start with this one. So Governor Wes Moore signed an executive order this last week to chart the future of Maryland's horse industry. This one is fascinating to me because a couple weeks ago, Owen mentioned this idea to me about the importance that horse racing was going to have in the 2026 election. I was not quite sure of it, but the more we've talked about it, the more I've really realized that it's going to be one of those kind of defining issues that separates who we are from who they are. And so, like I said, on November 7th, Wes Moore signed the Maryland Horse Industry Strategic Plan Executive Order. And what it requires is the plan for the horse industry to be presented to the governor at the end of 2026 and to the General Assembly in 2027. And it sort of nostalgically tries to keep the failing horse racing business central to the larger horse economy in Maryland, even though most of the horse business these days is not actually involved in racing at all. Things like recreational farm and other means of horse raising are doing a lot more business or a lot more successful, but they are basically now going to be asked by the governor and the special task force of industry insiders and government leaders that he's put together in order to help keep the horse racing industry afloat. And it's really fascinating the degree to when once you start understanding how much this administration loves horse racing and the money that comes from people in horse racing, you start to see that this is actually like a major issue for them. It's not Maryland is a horse state. It's a big issue for them, and I think it's a big issue for them not because of the cultural impact that it has on Maryland, but because of the money that the people who bring in horses bring to the campaign. We'll get into that later. But for now, we need to understand that he signed this executive order. And I want to say this. Greens oppose animal exploitation for entertainment. It's in our platform. It has been for a long time. And we'll be developing out a policy that interacts with this more directly, that it interacts with the animal exploitation, but also addresses the economic reality of the question. But I want to say one last thing about this, too, before we get to some key facts about the horse racing industry in Maryland. This is part of a strategy that Governor Moore is using to put important decisions on the 2027 legislature. So what is going to happen right now is this commission will come back and it will make its report at the end of 2026, like September of 2026. So that Governor Moore can get up on a debate stage at some point, a debate stage that we hope we're on, by the way, and he can say, when this report comes in about the future of Maryland's horse racing industry, you are going to want a leader like me at the helm because we are going to have to make hard choices. So he is setting up things right now where the policy will have to be enacted in 2027 so that he has an argumentative tool to sort of be able to use in whatever election is coming up next in order to be able to say, if you vote for me, you'll get this kind of steady hand, middle of the road leadership. If you vote for anybody else, you're going to get some crazy alternatives. So just keep that in mind because it's going to be an issue that comes up more in the election. And as we close out this segment here, I wanted to share some key facts about Maryland's horse racing industry. 400 plus horses have been killed at Maryland racetracks since 2014. $95.2 million in fiscal year 2025 was a subsidy from the casino revenues that kept the horse racing industry afloat. It did things like make sure the purses were good enough at payouts so that people would actually come to horse racing. That's $95.2 million that came from casino gambling that could have gone to any number of things. One of the things we've been talking a lot about in this campaign is that we want to double the budget for the Maryland library system. And you know what the budget for the Maryland library system was last year? It was $100 million. So sitting right there is $95 million that is subsidizing the horse racing industry that could be going into our libraries and having real meaningful and important impact. The last stat I want to give on this is that there's been a 66% decrease in attendance at Maryland's thoroughbred tracks from 2013 to 2022. This is a dying industry that is being subsidized by gambling profits, and the Democrats are trying to prop it up for the big donors who benefit from it and who have cultural attachment to it. We are going to take this issue on. We're going to develop a policy that it treats the horses like they need to be treated and treats the rest of the industry that is treating the horses well as a beneficial part of Maryland's economy, while we figure out how to undo the damage that Democrats have done to our economy and to those horses by getting rid of this subsidization of this industry. So that's it. That's my intro, my interesting story and a key fact. We will definitely be delving into this more later. We're going to talk about horse racing quite a bit over the next couple of years, or the next couple of months, because we think Governor Moore is going to talk about it a lot in order to placate his donors. So, Owen, any feedback on this horse story?
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, Andy, I don't think either of us got into this campaign thinking that horses would be such a central part of our policy investigations over the past few weeks. I think you mentioned that key part of our Green Party values against the exploitation of animals for entertainment or many other reasons. I think that we'll be guided by our values as we dig deeper into this policy issue. I think the other piece will be following the money. There's a lot of rich people who own horses, who race horses, and who, just as they have manipulated the tax code to protect their wealth and have found subsidies for their businesses, so too have they found subsidies and public monies for their pastimes, for their entertainment. And so working class folks don't go to the races the way they did when horse racing in Maryland and other states had a monopoly on legal gambling, right? That is what led to this being such a central part of the supposed culture of our state and other states, is that other forms of gambling were illegal, and horse racing and dog racing, for that matter, and boxing were in certain states, or in many states, legal. And increasingly, dog racing is now only in West Virginia, right? I don't think there are dog tracks in the other 49 states. There aren't dog racing tracks in Maryland anymore. And the same thing is happening in Maryland. There are fewer tracks because people, given a choice of where to gamble, choose not to bet on horses doing dangerous things and being hurt. So I think there are a lot of dynamics to this, but if we follow our values and we follow the money, we can see why, we can uncover why politicians at the very highest level of our state are propping up the horse racing industry. We can dig into what kind of development deals are going to go down by the Laurel track, by the Pimlico track, and make sure that neighbors in those communities have a say in the future of the development around those tracks, and that it's not the casinos and the big money players who are having their way behind closed doors.
Yep, you heard it here first. Horse racing is going to be a big part of the 2026 election. And I want to say, before we transition to your interesting fact, this is a thing that came to us from a conversation that you sort of randomly got looped into. And somebody brought this issue up to Owen, and we did our research and we did our due diligence, and we realized this was a good issue for us to be value aligned on, but also for the politics that we have to challenge the politics that they have, for the donors we have to be able to stand up to the donors they have. And so I think this is an issue that I think models the kind of politics we want to take forward. If somebody has an issue they think is important and they think that we'd like to hear about, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear it. And you might end up on one of these interesting